Hello, welcome. Today I'd like to read you a letter that was written by Walt Disney to Don Graham, the author of Composing Pictures, which is the book I'm currently studying on this channel. And it was written in 1935, and I will, I'm going to read the letter and then we'll discuss kind of the implications of the letter and why I think it's important today. So, we have a foreword here from Walt Stanchfield. Memo from Walt. Foreword. It is management's wish that the Disney tradition be revitalized and maintained. The tradition as we see it reflects the desires and aspirations of Walt, who strove to bring animation to a highly developed art. In attempting to recapture the quality attained in former years, we need but refer to the memo Walt wrote to Don Graham in 1935. It expresses the needs of the animation artist and the means he felt was necessary to develop and fulfill those needs. Walt not only encouraged his employees to better themselves by bringing teachers and lecturers to the studio, but he demanded constant improvement. We do not have Walt with us today, but we do have the great heritage of animation he left, plus the faculties and talent with which to uphold that heritage and hopefully improve upon it. There will be an attempt to reinstate the learning atmosphere that once permeated this studio. There will be various classes conducted by numerous instructors. There will be suggested reading and film study and discussion on action analysis and its application to our media. There will be no attempt to return to any particular era of the past, but to incorporate a composite of all the great accomplishments of the past into a future product that we can all be proud of. Walt Stanchfield, 1995. So that was during the, obviously the Disney Renaissance. Walt Stanchfield wrote that, and I think it's important because since that time, obviously Disney Studios doesn't do animation, traditional hand-drawn animation anymore. So it's kind of funny that we're seeing this sort of, that was sort of the last gasps and the last struggle to keep the art form alive, and they have failed to do so. Hopefully they'll bring it back, I don't know. But yeah, so I will, and I believe, just a second. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, Walt Stanchfield, who wrote that foreword to the letter, is also the guy who wrote the Drawn to Life books, volume 1 and 2. So he's definitely a very important artist, I would say, for us to study, and a teacher of artists. But now let's get into the letter from Walt to Don Graham. Date December 23rd, 1935. From Walt. Right after the holidays, I want to get together with you and work out a very systematic training course for young animators, and also outline a plan of approach for our older animators. Some of our established animators at the present time are lacking in many things, and I think we should arrange a series of courses to enable these men to learn and acquire the things they lack. Naturally, the first most important thing for any animator to know is how to draw. Therefore, it will be necessary that we have a good life drawing class. But you must remember, Don, that while there are many men who make a good showing in the drawing class, and who, from your angle, seem good prospects, these very men lack in some other phase of the business that is very essential to their success as animators. I have found that men respond much more readily to classes dealing with practical problems than to more theoretic treatment. Therefore, I think it would be a very good idea to appeal to these men by conducting these classes with the practical approach in mind. In other words, try to show in these classes that the men can make immediate practical application of what they are being taught. The talks given by Fergie, Fred Moore, Ham Lusk, and Fred Spencer have been enthusiastically received by all those in attendance. Immediately following these talks, I have noticed a great change in animation. Some men have made close to 100% improvement in the handling and timing of their work. This strikes me as pointing a way toward the proper method of teaching in the future. The following occurs to me as a method of procedure. Take the most recent pictures, minutely analyze all the business, action, and results using the better pieces of animation as examples, going through the picture with these questions in mind. 1. What was the idea to be presented? 2. How was the idea presented? 3. What was the result achieved? 4. After seeing this result, what could have been done to the picture from this point on to improve it? Encourage discussion on the part of the men present. If possible, have some of the animators over to talk to them about the problems they were confronted with in the picture, and what the animator himself would do if he had the chance to do the animation over. I believe these classes could be combined for presentation to all the animators, young and old as well. It would be bad if you made up a list of the qualifications of an animator in order of importance. Then all these men could see what it takes to be an editor. Or it wouldn't be bad, sorry. It wouldn't be bad if you made up a list of the qualifications of an animator in order of importance. Then all these men could see what it takes to be an animator and could check on themselves to see how nearly they approach the desired perfection. The list should start with the animator's ability to draw, then ability to visualize action, breaking it down into drawings and analyze the movement and mechanics of the action. From this point, we would come to his ability to caricature action, to take a natural human action and see the exaggerated funny side of it, to anticipate the effect or illusion created in the mind of the person viewing that action. It is important also for the animator to be able to study sensation and to feel the force behind sensation in order to project that sensation. Along with this, the animator should know what creates laughter. Why do things appeal to people as being funny? In other words, a good animator combines all these qualities. Good draftsmanship, knowledge of caricature of action as well as features, knowledge and appreciation of acting, ability to think up gags and put over gags, knowledge of story construction and audience values. knowledge and understanding of all the mechanical and detailed routine involved in his work, in order that he may apply his other abilities without becoming tied up in a knot by lack of technique along these lines. This is all very rough, just a jumble of thoughts, but what I plan is that we get together after the holidays, as suggested above, and really get these plans worked out in detail. Then we should strive to see that all the men whom we are drilling for animators are given the chance to develop along the lines outlined. I'm convinced that there is a scientific approach to this business, and I think we shouldn't give up until we have found out all we can about how to teach these young fellows the business. The first duty of the cartoon is not to picture or duplicate real action or things as they actually happen, but give a caricature of life and action. To picture on screen things that have run through the imagination of the audience. To bring to life dream fantasies and imaginative fancies that we have all thought of during our lives or have had pictured to us in various forms during our lives. Also to caricature things of life as it is today, or make fantasies of things we think today. The point must be made clear to the men that our study of the actual is not so that we may be able to accomplish the actual, but so that we may have a basis upon which to go into the fantastic, the unreal, the imaginative, and yet to let it have a foundation of fact, in order that it may more richly possess sincerity and contact with the public. A good many of the men misinterpret the idea of studying the actual motion. They think it is our purpose merely to duplicate these things. This misconception should be cleared up for all. I definitely feel that we cannot do the fantastic things based on the real unless we first know the real. This point should be brought out very clearly to all the new men and even the older men. Comedy, to be appreciated, must have contact with the audience. This we all know, but sometimes forget. By contact, I mean that there must be a familiar, subconscious association. Somewhere or at some time, the audience has felt or met with, or seen, or dreamt the situation pictured. A study of the best gags and audience reaction we have had will prove that the action or situation is something based on an imaginative experience or direct life connection. This is what I mean by contact with the audience. When the action or business loses its contact, it becomes silly and meaningless to the audience. Therefore, the true interpretation of caricature is the exaggeration of an illusion of the actual, or the sensation of the actual put into action. In our animation, we must not only show the actions or reactions of a character, we must picture also with the action the feelings of those characters. My experience has shown me that the most hilarious of comedies is always based on things actual, possible, or probable. That idea behind the things I just mentioned above can be incorporated in every stage of instruction, from life drawing clear through to the planning and staging of the work. I've often wondered why in your life drawing class you don't have your men look at the model and draw a caricature of the model, rather than an actual sketch, but instruct them to draw the caricature in good form, basing it on the actual model. I noticed a little caricature of one of the models in the life class made by Ward Kimball, and it struck me that there was an approach to the work that we should give consideration. I don't see why, using this method, you can't give the class all the fundamentals of drawing they need and still combine the work with the development of a sense of caricature. Would it be a good idea to take a man like Joe Grant and see what could be worked out with him along the lines of giving a talk some night on an approach to caricature? A Harpo caricature, what he sees and what he thinks about when he is trying to make a caricature. It might be advisable to have a talk with Joe on this. I started out early last fall to work out some sort of system with you for teaching elementary phases of animation in a systematic way. My thought at the time was not to go too straight. That's why I wanted to get somebody to demonstrate various walks in a comic way. I still think this is a very good idea and constitutes a far better approach to the younger man than giving them too many straight natural things that direct their minds to the unimaginative end of the business. It is possible that with the comedy, you can still teach them the fundamentals of all these actions. Take, for example, the walk. Why can't you teach the fundamentals of a straight walk, yet combine it with some person that is giving an exaggeration or a comic interpretation of a straight walk? Perhaps for very elementary instruction, it might be best to present straight action, but not to keep giving them straight action as they progress and gain a little experience. Start them going into the comedy angle or caricature angle of the action. For example, a fat person with a big pot belly. What comedy illusion does he give you? You could at the same time instruct the classes regarding the reason why he has to move a certain way because of his weight, etc. Present the walk soliciting discussion on what is the illusion, or what illusion does that person, fat with pot belly, give you as you see him? What do you think of as you see him walking along? Does he look like a bowl of jelly? Does he look like an inflated balloon with arms and legs dangling? Does he look like a roly-poly? In other words, analyze the fat person's walk and the reasons for his walking that way, but don't stop until you've had the group bring out all the comedy that can be expressed in that fat person's walk. Also, all the character, but drive for the comedy side of the character. Take a skinny person, somebody that's loose jointed, angular, shoulder blades showing. What does he suggest? Does he look hung together with wires like a walking skeleton? Does he look like a marionette flopping around? Does he look like a scarecrow blowing in the wind? What illusion is created by the walk, by the movement of that skinny, loose jointed person? In discussing a short person with short legs, he would naturally have quick movements, seems to move very fast, would have to take twice as many steps as a taller person, thus making him look as if he were going at a greater speed. What illusion do you get from a person like that? Does he strike you as a little toy wound up, running around on wheels? Does he look like a little pecking geese pup, a dwarf, or a midget? There are a number of things that could be brought up in these discussions to stir the imagination of the men, so that when they get into actual animation, they're not just technicians, but they're actually creative people. In the study of other problems, is it possible to bring out more the exaggeration of form and action, as in the study of the balance of the body? Can we bring that out even to an exaggerated point? We'll probably make it stronger to them, make them realize more the necessity of that balance of the body, and yet point out how they can utilize that to strengthen their business when they get into animation, as in bending. In someone bending over, can we show the exaggeration in that action by showing how the pants pull up in the back to an exaggerated degree that becomes comical? Can we show how the coat stretches across the back and the sleeves pull up and the arms seem to shoot out as from a turtleneck as they shoot out of the sleeves? What can we do to bring these points out stronger to the men? In lifting, for example, or other actions, we should drive at the fundamentals of the animation and at the same time incorporate the caricature. When someone is lifting a heavy weight, what do you feel? Do you feel that something is liable to crack any minute and drop down? Do you feel that because of the pressure he's got, he's going to blow up? That his face is going to turn purple? That his eyes are going to bulge out of their sockets? That the tension in the arm is so terrific that he's going to snap? What sensations do you get from someone? In other words, rising, different ways of rising. Sitting. When someone is sitting, when he sits down and relaxes, does it look as if all the wind goes out of him? Does he look like a loose bag of nothing? Also in pushing, in the extremeness of a push, the line shoots right down from the fingertips, clear down to the heel. In pulling, show the stretch and all that. Bring out the caricature of those various actions, at the same time driving at the fundamentals of the actual. The various expressions of the body are important. The animators go through animation and don't make the positions of the body hold positions and relax positions express anything. They try to do all the expression with the parts that are moving, whereas the body should enter into it. Without the body entering into the animation, the other things are lost immediately. Example, an arm hung onto a body it doesn't belong to, or an arm working and thinking all by itself. I think something could be worked out to develop this point. Even if you got a person up behind a screen, a model perhaps, and threw a light on them. Have the class do nothing but watch the silhouette as the model goes through different poses, noting how the body enters into the expression of an action. Or we could photograph the action to show to the men. The study of this would be a big help toward making the men realize the value of getting the story and the business over in the rough drawings, that is, the action itself, rather than depending on little trimmings on the clothes, facial expressions, things like that to put over the business. If the animators get the groundwork right, that is, the action, underneath all these trimmings right, then what they add is going to be twice as effective. It is a very important point that we must impress on the new men and the older men. After we have given the men all the suggestions we can that have to do with expressing ideas through the body, then we can come down to the value of the facial expression, the use of the eyes, eyebrows, the mouth, the relation to one another, how the eyes and the mouth have to work together sometime for expression, how they may work independently for expression at other times. In other words, then we would go into the combined use of expressive features and expressive actions of the body. Then it would be good to take one away from the other and see which is the most important. We should have courses in staging and planning. These courses can be given by some of our more successful animators. In other words, we should try to show how to analyze a scene or piece of business before starting to work on it. We should try to show the men ways of visualizing action in their minds, breaking the action so that the men are prepared in advance to begin animation of the action and know thoroughly what they're going to animate, So many of the men start in now and have no idea what they're going to do when they start the scene. They know what they're supposed to do, but they can't break it down in a systematic way that will enable them to go knowingly ahead. Many men do not realize what really makes things move, why they move, what the force behind the movement is. I think a course along that line, accompanied by practical examples of analysis and planning, would be very good. In other words, in most instances, the driving force behind the action is the mood, personality, the attitude of the character, or all three. Therefore, the mind is the pilot. We think of things before the body does them. We also do things on the spur of the moment by reaction to stimuli that are telegraphed to the mind by the nerves, etc. There are also things carried out by the subconscious mind, reflexes, actions that have become habit through repetition, instincts. In other words, the subconscious mind is an assistant oftentimes in carrying out things that may or may not have been taught. Examples of that are sleeping, lighting a cigarette and throwing a match away without any thought, whistling, walking, running, sitting. It's not necessary to think of those actions. But certain actions we do think about. Certain actions we deliberately plan. We plan them very quickly in our mind. The point to bring out here is that when a character knows what he's going to do, he doesn't have to stop before each individual action and think to do it. He has planned in advance in his mind. For example, say the mind thinks, I'll close the door, lock it, then I'm going to undress and go to bed. Well, you walk over to the door. Before the walk is finished, you're reaching for the door. Before the door is closed, you reach for the key. Before the door is locked, you're turning away while you're walking away. You're undoing your tie. And before you reach the bureau, you have your tie off. In other words, before you know it, you're undressed and you've done it with one thought: I'm going to bed. A lot of valuable points could be brought out to the men in showing them that it is not necessary for them to take a character to one point, complete that action completely, and then turn to the following action as if he had never given it a thought until after completing the first action. Anticipation of action is important. In other words, this enters into animation in many ways, and we have many serious difficulties coming up because of the men's inability to visualize things in the proper way. I think a good study of music would be indispensable to the animator. A realization on their part of how primitive music is, how natural it is for people to want to go to music. A study of rhythm, the dance, the various rhythms that enter into our lives every day, how rhythmical the body really is, and how well balanced the body really is. That in itself is music. In other words, it could be music in the body. We dance. We can keep time to rhythm without ever being taught a baby. A baby does it, cannibals do it. But fancy dancing or any trick stuff we have to learn. There are things in life that we do to rhythm that come natural to us. Notice how rhythmic an action like pounding with a hammer is. There's a reason for that. You must have that rhythm or you can't carry out that action completely. Also, sawing a board. See how necessary it is to have a good rhythm for that? Also, walking. If you walked without rhythm, where would you get? You'd have to be thinking all the time what to do next. You'd have to set your mind to walking rhythmically. instead of doing it naturally. Naturally, the body is very well balanced. When one hand does something, the other serves as a balance to it. There are various things that combine balance in the body, subconscious balance, and yet the animators do not know it. They will do something with one hand, they don't know what to do with the other. So they will do something entirely contrary to what that hand should be doing, because they don't understand the basic concept of balance. This idea of balance of the body ties in with the idea of expression of the body. If there is balance, it adds expression to the things that the body is doing. If you don't have that balance of the body, then your expressions are wrong, insincere, unconvincing. Those concepts also tie in with overlapping action. In other words, we could work out all these basic concepts in such a way as to show them all related, interdependent, and have to do with each other. And we could tie them together in various ways, showing different combinations of their application. We will thus stir up the men's minds more, and they will begin to think of a lot of things that would never occur to them otherwise if they weren't pointed out to them. I'd like to have a study of dialogue. I want to prepare a course on dialogue, phrasing, and rhythm of dialogue, moods and character of dialogue, expressions, gestures, directness, use of the eyes, eyebrows, mouth, head, arms, body, tongue, inhalation, exhalation, and various other aspects that have to do with the successful picturization of dialogue in the cartoon. Let's see if we can't organize something like this and get it going right after the first of the year. All right, that's it. That's the letter. It's about 9 pages long. All right, I'm going to stop the camera real quick. Okay. Well, it's been a while since I read this letter for the first time. Probably maybe 2 years, something like that. And I forgot a lot about it. But the most important thing I took away from it that time when I first read it was that Walt believed that there's a systematic, scientific way to teach animation. There we go. So he's basically expecting that the sort of, I think this is 1935, it's kind of the time of the production line, the Ford Motor Company doing the assembly line. And I think a lot of people were applying that to lots of industries, right? And it was the same with animation. It went from being one person doing everything, like Ub Iwerks, who would animate every frame in the story, till he reluctantly had, I believe, an assistant and in-betweeners. And a lot has gone on since then, and a lot of the things that Walt is talking about in the latter half of his letter, I think are really covered in The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, the 12 Principles of Animation. I think they did what he said. I think they did combine all of the qualities of a good animator. They wrote it down, they put it down in The Illusion of Life. I think it's very complete. I will say though that it's complete in the technical kind of sense of like how the studio operates, right? You have the story men, you have the supervising animators, you have the key animators, you have the assistant animators, you have the in-betweeners, you have the ink, the paint, then you have the photographers who photograph all the cells and have to adjust the backgrounds, and so there's all these technical descriptions. So I think the illusion of life is sort of gets at the heart of what Walt wanted. But I think composing pictures by Don Graham gets you in sort of it gets you beyond the mere technique. Don Graham, in composing pictures, he's not concerned with how to sharpen your pencil and how to mix colors or anything. He's talking about the principles of good composition and the energy that's created when you are making marks on a surface, regardless of what the technique is. Could be using canvas, animation, could be watercolor. Doesn't really matter. What he's talking about is how our vision is being affected by that surface and the energy that the marks make within the frame. So I think that Don Graham's book was written long before The Illusion of Life. But I think it's I guess it's more theoretical, but I think it's probably an important place to start, because it gets you thinking in terms of what one good picture is. Animation is lots of pictures played back. But if you can't even make one good frame, if you can't make one good background, if you can't make one good character illustration, then trying to do 24 pictures per second, you're going to run into a lot of problems. So I think starting with Don Graham is kind of the best way to get that. Then moving into the Illusion of Life is sort of maybe something you can read in tandem or not. Like, I would put it after, just because it is very technical. So anyways, I think the thing that strikes me most about Walt here is the early part of it. Obviously, he says, naturally, the first most important thing for any animator to know is how to draw. Therefore, it will be necessary that we have a good life drawing class. Interesting. Life drawing class, as opposed to just copying photos or copying an animation or copying, drawing from casts or, sculptures, things like that. No, he wants, it will be necessary that we have a good life drawing class. So there is this prioritization of life drawing, and I think that has gone away in a lot of ways. Maybe it's easier. I don't know if it's. I mean, I've modeled for a life drawing class in college, and it was fun, but it was also like very rare. It was kind of hard to find, and I didn't draw while I was in there. I was the model, so everybody was drawing me. But I would have liked to be able to participate. But it's a challenging thing to find, and there isn't. I really don't think there is a replacement for that. So it's pretty difficult. I think maybe closest we can get to it is watching, getting good quality videos of models posing. So there is some options. I guess we have to do what we can with what we have, right? And then I think I found that men respond much more readily to classes dealing with practical problems than to more theoretic treatment. I think this is really important, and it's kind of probably where I need to make the most improvement on my own stuff. Is that basically dealing with practical problems. So instead of talking about animation in general, it's better to like he says, have a funny walk and then break that down and animate it, I guess, as like a practical application, and just basically getting into the drawing itself, getting into the animating straight away, and spending more time in that process of getting feedback, doing all the drawings, doing the animation, getting feedback on it, and let that recursive process educate us. So that's really good. And then also having really good animators talk about what they were thinking and feeling and when they draw, when they animate, which is kind of hard to do, but I think documenting the process is where we actually have an advantage here, because even at this time there wasn't a lot of behind the scenes work. There wasn't a lot of cameras on while they're drawing, while they're animating. So if we can do that, we'll have a bigger advantage, because watching someone animate by hand does get you much more. You're not really knowing what they're thinking necessarily, but you're watching how they move, how they behave, their timing, and like how long are they drawing, how often are they erasing, how often are they stopping and thinking before they draw. There's all these things you can pick up from that. So definitely documenting the process of animation is going to be important, I think, in getting an advantage over the fact that we don't have as many animators to ask and talk to like they would have had in the studio, where they had dozens of animators available. We can help each other by just documenting ourselves as we draw and as we animate, and then describe it. Yeah, so I think that's it. Good. Oh, his heavy focus on caricature, which I think is weird. There's quite a bit of resistance to this, I think, because even though it's popular, I think a lot of young artists want to be taken seriously, and they somehow view caricature as not a serious endeavor, or like or maybe they just want to get really good at realism, so they don't like caricature because they need to kind of hyper focus on accuracy, which I think is true. But here he's talking about, like, you can do both. You can have the solid drawing and use the reference, use the model, get good information from it, but also push and pull at it a little bit to exaggerate it. And I think that's critical. And I also think it's something that is uniquely human, in terms of when you're caricaturing, you have to be emotionally responding to what you're drawing in the moment, which is something that an artificial drawing process doesn't have, a mechanical process. The camera is not emotionally responding to the image that's going through its sensor. And I think that with the AI image making and stuff, it's not subtle enough to really caricature, because the caricature is the border between reality, like perfect truth to what you're seeing, and then sliding it very subtly in different ways, or some not so subtle ways. But even in the most exaggerated caricature, there's this subtle relationship to the truth that's being changed in a way. It's given, and like if you're making eyes, if you're caricaturing someone and making their eyes bigger, you might make their ears smaller just to even exaggerate the eyes more. So you're pushing and pulling on the proportions and the relationship between the features and the body and everything. And you're emotionally responding to it as you're doing it. So every time you make a mark, that mark, you're looking at it and you're saying, how does this make me feel? Is this funnier? And you might redraw it, or you might you're going to draw things after it. So the next marks you make are going to be based on that mark. And so you're almost dancing with the image when you're caricaturing versus just copying what's in front of you, like a photograph or an AI or whatever it is. You're playing with it, you're moving it around, and you're exaggerating things to get a feeling within yourself. So I think that's probably super important to focus on as well. In my own work, I'm very reluctant to caricature, but I think reading this again is kind of inspiring me to look more into it. Yeah, that's all for now, though. It's a good, interesting letter. It's interesting to see how Walt Disney goes on his kind of tangents where he kind of pours out a lot of ideas quickly, which is interesting. And he kind of carries things on beyond. I don't know. He didn't write a lot in terms of he didn't write. He didn't write his own biography, things like that. So it's kind of interesting to see into how he wrote, how he communicated, and I hope you enjoyed that and are inspired. And yeah, we'll get back into Don Graham's book and keep moving on. I have the Drawn to Life books to get through as well, and The Illusion of Life. And that's kind of the trifecta of the Disney studio kind of books is Composing Pictures by Don Graham, The Illusion of Life, and then Drawn to Life. So I'll be covering all of those. All right, thank you, and bye.